Hey guys, welcome back to another Extinction Spreadsheet video. I know it hasn't been that long since Extrabeer, Pillow, and I dropped V6 of this spreadsheet, but we've had some major additions to it all thanks to this absolute gamer here, the Nine-Tailed Fox. Basically, what Fox did is right after we posted V6, he found a way to measure the exact damage values, like what damages you're doing to enemies, and also the distance you are from the enemy using Cheat Engine and IW6X. It was a lot of work for him. He was on it for several weeks straight, but using the data that he very painstakingly collected, I was able to complete what was essentially my original goal of the spreadsheet, which is full damage plots for every single weapon in the game. It also allowed me to flesh out many other parts of this spreadsheet, as evidenced by it being 86 pages long now. So, massive shout out to Fox for his work here. He basically solved Extinction. So, I'm going to do this video a little differently than my previous spreadsheet videos where I would basically just read through the entire thing and talk about Extinction for over an hour. All of the stuff that Extra and I talked about in the V6 spreadsheet applies just fine, with maybe a few exceptions that we've changed. This is mostly just straight additions, so I have the list of those additions pulled up on my other monitor, and I'm just going to read off basically everything that has been added for this time. So let's get started. So on this first page here, we've added all of the min damage values for all of the weapons here. We used to only have the max damage. And then also here's the range values. If you're unfamiliar with how damage drop works in COD, basically, you deal your max damage from point blank range out to this distance, and then you drop linearly to this minimum damage at this, I call it min range, maybe that's a little confusing, but yeah, linear drop from here to here, and then you sustain minimum damage the rest of the way out. It's really commonsensical if you see the damage plots on how this works. The range units here are just the in-game coordinate for range, what it uses to measure distances in-game. You can convert these to feet. 1 foot is equal to 12.5 range units, so pretty much the only time that actually matters is the 65-foot kill challenge down here. That's 813 range units if you want to, do the math, but what is a foot in game isn't really comparable to what a foot is in real life. So any unit we could use here would just be equally abstract. So I just went with the in-game units because the numbers are nice and clean and consistent. So the DPS value here, this is just the max DPS still. I'm not factoring in the minimum DPS, though we do have later on in the damage plots the actual full DPS plots for all of these guns. So we do have that taken into account later. All right, I have Fox went ahead and verified like all of these damage values for the cryptids, or HP values, not damage values. So these are, not much has changed, but we've went and confirmed them with stuff that we pulled out of Fox's cheat engine work, as well as we had a new data mine get added in with specific weapon stats, which is just awesome. So that's helped confirm numbers in this even more. We have, so in here the barrier hive, barrier 2, it went down from 100k to 99k. Big change. We were pretty accurate about that. And the breeder first one, initially I think I had this as 10,000. Looks like it's 8,000 now. And the honey badger, I previously had it as 80 damage, and we managed to find out that it's actually 85 using Fox's cheat engine stuff. Then this page here, the wonder weapons, has changed a lot. We have damages for the Venom SX now. That's new, right? We didn't have this. And then I think I've refined some numbers here on the Venom X up to 1500 damage. I want to say I think I had 1800 in the old ones, but someone would have to fact check me on this. But this is pretty confident. Well, this is right. The tank ability here, it adds 25% melee damage while it's up. I've noticed Extra Bear has been using this a lot in the 10 relic runs because you pop the tank ability and then you can stab rhinos a lot better. The arc multiplier, turns out it's not 34%, it's 35%. It's another little catch we have here. And then we added a whole bunch about the awakening arc. So this is new and important. So your arc is a 35% bonus, but if you're on awakening, there is an additional multiplier that happens on top of that, and it depends on your loadout. So if by default it's a 25% multiplier on top of the 35% multiplier, right? So that's a 69% effective buff from the arc. If you're a weapon specialist, it's only 15% instead of 25%. So that's 55%. So it's a little less, but you know, if you're a +4 weapon specialist, you're still going to be doing more damage than a non-weapon specialist, even though they're getting a bigger arc multiplier. But then the real kicker is that if you have explosive, or of course Cryptid Slayer ammo, this extra awakening arc buff doesn't apply at all. You just get one, and so it's back to a regular arc. And this, we've all found this in the data mine, like in the code as well. It's not like this is what it is, even though it's a little weird. This is why the USR can one-shot hunters and the L115 can't, even though they have the same damage profile. It's because the USR is getting this extra bonus to its arc multiplier. So this next page here, this is all new. So we have finally something that's pretty definitive on what the Engineer +4 buff is actually doing, and of course it's incredibly weird. So, you know, let's just go over this whole page. So these things in here get a buff from the Engineer +4 explosive. It's not always 1.5 times. The propane gets a triple damage. I don't know why, it just does. Maybe it is getting both the traps and explosive buff. In fact, I think that's what we have here. Yeah, it looks like it's getting both of the buffs from Engineer, so it totals for a triple buff, while the fire only gets the 2x trap damage buff. So yeah, propane tank is a trap and an explosive for this. Pretty cool. Then all these guys, Sticky Flare, Pipe Bomb, Venom, Bouncing Betty, and Mortars get 1.5x buff. And I have the base damage for Mortars is C loadout because it depends on how upgraded they are. And the Venom Nades get a 20% buff. So Engineer +4 buff works to various degrees on these things. And then these explosives do not get the Engineer +4 buff. So SOFLAM, Disruptor Grenades, Canister Bombs, Semtex, Claymore, Panzerfaust, Castet, Disruptor, the explosive ammo, and then all of the equalizers and strike packages other than mortars. So this asterisk here on the Panzerfaust and Castet, these damages are the direct impact damage. Yeah, so direct impact damage plus explosive damage. So this is like your maximum explosive damage if you are like right next to the enemy, and then this is the additional damage you get from hitting them with the projectile itself. Then some notes we have on this stuff here. The rhinos seem to take half damage from explosives. The venom damage does not get any buff from the venom DOT damage does not get a buff from Engineer +4, right? The venoms all have the same damage and range values. And yeah, propane tanks, we talked about that. The IMS and propane fire are identical, so they can the IMS can complete the propane tank challenge. I think we've had this note around before. And yeah, there's our direct impact damage and explosive damage. Oh, and here on the VenomX, I'll before I put the spreadsheet out, I'll swap this around so this VenomX format matches the Panzer and Cassette format. Let me write that down real quick. So then onto the traps here. Fox also went ahead and tested every single individual trap in the game, like every individual trap location, because the trap damage varies location to location, which is just fantastic spaghetti code, right? It's the worst on point of contact. Most of the maps are mostly consistent after that, but yeah. So you can see here on point of contact, pretty much every single electric fence does a different amount of damage, and they're all listed out here. So yeah, here's the 2 for the first area, the 1 in the second area. This is referring to the electric fence that is at the border between the second and third area. It's where we do all like the turret shenanigans, you know. Not the electric walls. The second area electric walls do 720. This is why they like one shot half of the enemies in the game. Um, the puddle on point of contact only does 180, and of course the puddle on awakening does 720 for some reason. And then yeah, the third area electric fences on point of contact. So this is if you're looking at the big wall of electric fences from like the start of the third area, this is left to right there, and there's these 4 of them. And the notable thing is the third one does 720 damage. It does like max trap damage for some reason. A little wild, right? But yeah, after point of contact, the traps get a lot less variant, and so the only the only thing it changes is these electric floors in Nightfall. This is just first area, then second area, then third area. So both of the ones in the third area are doing max damage. That's why they stomp so hard. Then yeah, Mayday, Awakening, and Exodus, they're all consistent. And these traps are all the ones that receive a 2x damage buff, and then these traps here don't receive any damage buff from Engineer. So all of the Teslas, and also here's how much damage each of the individual Teslas do. Nucleic does a lot more than the others, obviously. The fire traps don't also don't get the buff. Then we have a section here about the buyable turrets. So these are referring to the little miniguns that are mounted around the maps that you can buy, right? And that's the regular turrets. The electric turrets is talking about the ones on like Mayday for the Kraken fight. You have the turrets you use to kill the Kraken. They're also on Exodus, I believe, but you don't really use so much on Exodus. Interestingly, they both have the same DPS. The electric turrets do double the damage but half the fire rate, right? So it's a little interesting, but the electrics do have a ton more ammo. So the ammo column here, we've got 3 numbers, right? So this is how many shots it takes to overheat it, and this is the total ammo, and then this is Engineer plus 3 gets you a 50% ammo buff. It doesn't affect the overheating though. Hopping off and back on the turret allows you to skip the cooldown when you overheat it or when you get it close to overheating it. That's a very useful trick, especially for like the Mayday Kraken fight, because you can just continually shoot it by hopping on and off the turret. Never have to worry about the cooldown. Yeah, the electric turrets on Exodus, even though it's like the doing the same damage, it doesn't need to rev up. It just goes. And the electric turrets also arc. Like this, they have arcing stun built into them. It deals 200 damage per shot. These Buyable Turrets do not get the weapon specialist damage multiplier. And yeah, that's about all of these. You're probably never ever going to use them, but there's the information. And then the classic little table here. Does the 5% armory damage boost that says it applies to everything actually apply to everything? No, it doesn't apply to these. It doesn't apply to Vulture, Sentry, Traps, Mortar, Grenade Turret. Yes to everything else. So I think that's all we had for the explosives chart. Then on the weapon map, we added the Cassette to Mayday because for the last like 6 years I'd forgot that the Cassette was on Mayday, but there it is. Then nothing has changed here in top 10 land. And this was here in V6, but the burst fire is new. So here's a chart for all of the weapons that can have burst fire to show that it's a bad idea on everything always. So yeah, so this calculates the effective DPS nerf from putting burst fire on, right? Going from the base gun, the base weapons DPS here, and then to the effective DPS you get from burst fire, because it nukes your total fire rate when you force yourself to shoot 3-round bursts with a big burst delay. So yeah, everything that's full auto gets absolutely tanked. Like the ARX does half damage with burst fire on. The only thing that's like even close to being okay is the like MK14 and SVU here, and that's because their fire rate is super duper slow to begin with. Like the SVU is 400 rounds per minute. That's really slow. So it it's only it's only a 20% DPS drop here for the SVU. The M9, obviously you can't take the burst fire off of it, but theoretically if you could, then it would just literally be an MP443. Look, there's 1000 DPS with better range. So that's, unfortunate that it has to be burst fire, but hey, at least it has a lot of ammo in it. And of course, the MR28, if you've ever used burst fire on it, it turns it into a completely different gun. We'll get into this more in the damage drop section. But yeah, it takes the base, it takes the max damage from 500 to 165, which is just silly. Then it does change the range profile a lot, but it's never worth it. You lose so much damage from putting burst fire on the MR28. And then to read the notes I have about burst fire here. Yes, the only weapons where burst fire may be worth it are the SC 2010, IA2, MK14, SVU, just the semi-auto stuff that's not the MR28, right? Their fire caps, spamming this fire rate for an entire run can hurt your fingers, especially like, if you ever had to do like a P226 run or something, that kind of adds up, and so burst fire can save your fingers. So I guess that's one plus to it, but putting burst fire on any weapon other than those is effectively worse than the do less damage relic. That's a 0.66x DPS nerf there. Yeah, putting burst fire on the MR28 changes it into a whole different gun that's worse. Don't do it. It's not worth it. It looks like it gives you an extended mags. Well, it gives you an extended mags, but you effectively only get 6 shots per mag, so it's kind of like a smaller mag in a way. Yeah, the M9 here. Then a fun little note, if you're on IW6X, you can actually put the semi-auto attachment on the ARs just using console commands. I did this in my cursed extinction video. I had like a semi-auto honey badger. It's a little silly, but it's a fun little trick if you want to make a gun really suck. So then onto this enemy HP and damage chart. I've reformatted it quite a bit. Hopefully trying to make it a little easier to read, because it's kind of hard to tell like what exactly applied to what at a glance. So I've given it like the typical spreadsheet, like alternating white and gray, but then the gray was just like really boring, so I kind of colored it based on what the my mic just decided to disconnect. That's fine. Yeah, so we color coded this a little bit and just moved numbers around, so hopefully this is a little easier to read. But other than just like confirming numbers and stuff here, it's not much has changed. I need to update that breeder HP though. That should be 8,000, not 10,000. All right. Now we're going to go down to the loadout section. I don't think I've changed anything in the rest of this other than like little formats and typo catching. So okay, down here in the loadout section, we've added the damage values for the strike packages. So we didn't have these previously. These are good to have. Then the Trinity rocket, we used to just have the Moz here, I believed, and then we got to add the Trinity rocket as well as all of its upgrading stuff here, and updated the portable turret damage numbers here to stuff that we've confirmed in game using the cheat engine stuff. So that's all good. This loadout section is very, very good. I like how this has turned out. It's a lot more useful than what they tell you in game. Right, and then I didn't change anything in the score section. Pillow kind of nailed this thing. So we get to move on all the way down to the bulk of it, which is our damage plot. So I'm probably going to spend a good amount of time here talking about this. So yeah, why not? Let's just read this whole intro. So the weapons of Extinction all have damage profiles like they do in multiplayer. The distance within which a weapon deals its maximum damage is referred to as max range. That's this distance here. The distance beyond which a weapon deals its minimum damage is referred to as min range. That's this distance here. After this, you're dealing minimum damage. Between the max range and min range, damage drops linearly with distance. That's this section right here. And then these three segments of the graph make up a weapon's damage profile. And then I've got this whole damage profile here kitted out to give you a tutorial on how all of these charts are going to work. So the x-axis on this graph here is the in-game damage units. I have conversion factors for other units that you might like to know shown here as well. So 12.5 units is 1 foot. Like I said way earlier, that means that 65 feet for the 65-foot like distance kill challenge is 813 units. So that's here. That would be here. And then the Vanguard on Awakening uses meters as its range output, and so 40 units is 1 meter. I don't think that this foot to meter conversion is consistent. Let me see. What's 40 over 12.5? This is pretty close to being correct with what is a foot and a meter. And then you know, these what counts as a foot in game is you know, completely irrelevant to your real life experience of a foot or a meter. So these are pretty abstract units, which is why I've been using I use the in-game damage unit, so we just get clean numbers everywhere. The one thing that actually does have a bit of a physical representation in the game is the forwards footstep. This is what I used for my damage plots previously, like in the previous editions of the spreadsheet. Basically, if you are moving forward, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, as long as you're not sprinting, you're just like holding the stick forward. Your character's footsteps are a consistent length every single time. So like the visual bobbing and the audible like thud of your foot hitting the ground takes the same amount of distance. So you can, if you really, really want to, you could figure out how many steps it takes for your weapon's damage to fall off, but that's all a bit like schizophrenic. You don't really need to do that. The only use of these is just telling you know, what gun's better than the others, right? And then yeah, so the y-axis on the graphs is either damage per shot or damage per second. So if I write damage, that means damage per shot. Most of them are damage graphs, but I'm including 1 DPS damage per second graph for each of the weapon classes, so you can compare them factoring in the fire rates basically. So the weapon plots, they all have a base damage curve. This is just your gun with no muzzle attachment on it. This is what it does raw. Then they have the muzzle brake curve, and so the muzzle brake increases your range by 20%. It doesn't affect your damage, so it just takes this base curve and pushes it out by 20%, right? So the max range gets scooted out, the min range gets scooted out. This line here gets scooted out as well, but it doesn't increase the damage, so it doesn't affect the vertical at all. The arc increases both damage and range, so it goes it doesn't just go out or up, it goes up and out in this direction, which is good because that means better. So the arc increases your damage by 35%. If you're a pistol, that's 25%. And that's just a flat buff across the entire curve, but it increases this max range value by 1.75. It almost doubles the distance you keep your maximum damage. The min damage goes out by 1.5, so it increases the min range by less than the max range, so it makes this, which that's a good thing because it means you sustain this maximum damage for a lot longer. It does make this damage drop curve steeper, and in one very special case, it makes this damage drop curve so steep it goes upside down and bugs out the holographic sight, but we'll get to that later. And then the Awakening arc, mentioned this earlier in the damage multipliers section. I'm assuming that you are not a weapon specialist and you're not using explosive ammo. So this is 25% higher than the arc line. So yeah, 35% to get here, another 25% to get here. If you're a weapon specialist, this would only be 15%, so it'd be a little lower. And then if you're using explosive ammo, regardless of what class you are, it is just the arc curve and you don't get any special bonus here. This doesn't impact the range beyond what the arc does. It's just an extra damage multiplier on top of the arc if you're playing on Awakening. So we can get into the pistols. This is actually kind of what made me want to start doing the spreadsheet in the first place. Is way back in the day, someone posted this basically damage plots for the pistols on the COD forums. They didn't have ones for the individual pistols. They didn't account for the muzzle brake and arc. They just had the pistol like damage plot basically. But the COD forums got taken down in like 2021, maybe 2020. I don't know, a while ago, and that was lost to time. I tried to get it back with the Wayback Machine, but it was like one layer too deep in the website for me to get. But it's all right because here they are now, and they're even better. So most of the guns I have their range going to 3,500, but the pistols I maxed it at 2,000. That's why the P226 like takes up the whole thing. This isn't like crazy, stupid, insane range, but it's a lot for compared to the other pistols. So yeah, you get a sense of what the curves look like for each of the guns, and then here is all of the pistols compared on the same plot. This is damage per shot, right? So the MP443, it does the least damage and has the least range, but it's full auto, so it gets the highest DPS. Then the P226 does, of the three like normal-ish pistols, it has the highest damage and the biggest range, and then the M9A1 is just exactly in the middle of them. This is kind of a common theme that you'll see popping up, like damage, range, I guess like power per shot versus fire rate, ammo versus rate of fire, and where you'll have like a low option gun, a high option gun, and a middle one. That kind of shows up a lot. And then the 44 is here just doing its own thing. It does crazy stupid damage up close, but it also drops off really fast, probably a lot faster than you're expecting it to. This is why the 44, if you've ever thought it feels inconsistent because it'll one-shot a scout up close, but then it takes the entire mag at any kind of a distance, this is why. And then our next plot we have is the DPS plot. So this is the same as here, but multiplied by their rates of fire. So you'll notice that the numbers here are higher because this is damage. This is maximum theoretical DPS. You might see this and think the P226 is absolutely crazy, but keep in mind it's semi-auto. You would need a macro to pull this off. This is way too fast to do. Like maybe you could like get it to burst out like a drrrr, which is like spamming, but you wouldn't be able to do that accurately or for a continuous amount of time. So the P226 this is a theoretical maximum, right? So yeah, red M9, 44, M443, P226. Onto the assault rifles. So here's an important thing that's going to show up. I have the ARX 160 and the SA 805 on this one curve. Same deal here with the AK-12 and the Remington. Lots of guns share the same exact damage profile. So yeah, the ARX SA 805, they both do this exact same amount of damage at any distance. They do have different rates of fire, so their DPSs are different, but the damage is the same. This shows up quite a lot. So yeah, here's the ARX and the SA 805. They do a lot of damage up close, have a high fire rate, but they also drop real fast. It's kind of the opposite story for the AK and the Remington. They deal a lot less damage, but they last for a lot longer. Also, these have access to the Awakening Arc. At least the R5 does. The AK-12 doesn't, but I just threw it on here because if it could have an Awakening Arc, this is what it would be. Then the Maverick, this is interesting. So the Maverick is actually very different from the R5, even though on a surface level it looks to be very similar. It has a totally different damage profile. It basically starts dropping like immediately, but the damage drop range is huge. So this min range is really, really far. So it's just wherever you go with the Maverick, it's on this downward part of the curve somewhere. So that's why the R5 is probably better in a lot of instances, because a lot of the times that you're, in this Maverick's damage drop range, you're still at the max damage for the R5. Then here's the SC 2010. It's semi-auto, so that's why it has crazy range and high damage. It also can't take a muzzle brake for some reason. It makes no sense. Maybe, no. I had an idea, but no, I have no idea why this can't take a muzzle brake. It just can't. It's fun, right? We love spaghetti code. Now the Ripper AR. This is actually an important distinction to make. The SMG Ripper has the same damage values, like it has the same max and min damage, but it actually has a very different damage like range profile. The AR has a lot more reach than the SMG does, which is interesting. And I think I do have a comparison of these two later on. Honey Badger, the GOAT, it can't take a muzzle brake, also can't take an arc. That's kind of why it was removed. I don't know why they couldn't just fix that, but I don't develop games. I have him marked as this cool little yellow Morse code looking thing, so it's easier to identify that it's not a normal AR later on. Here we have our first comparison chart. So this is the ARX versus the SA-805 versus the K7. When I do these comparison charts for guns that aren't just like one class, I do it on DPS, so it's factoring in the rate of fire, and this is an accurate representation of how fast these things are killing things. And very interestingly, the K7 actually has a lot more range than the ARX and the SA-805, despite being an SMG. Who would have thought? But yeah, that's just how the game works. You're never actually going to have to choose between any of these guns because they're all on different maps, right? Like POC, Nightfall, Mayday, Awakening, Exodus. So this is kind of like the high DPS option, like full auto high DPS. And there's one available on each map. So yeah, they're not really in competition with each other, but you can get a sense for how they perform compared to each other here. Then this one is actually a competition. So these are the big 40-round mag guns. So Maverick, R5, AK-12, MTAR. MTAR is different because it's an SMG. That's why it's Well, I mean, that's why it has a lot less range, but then again, the K7 has way more range than these ARs, so who knows what's happening. But here's a, let me zoom in on that. Here's a good comparison. This is the Maverick here, this red line, with its super duper long damage drop, and then here's the R5, and the AK-12 is higher just because it has a higher fire rate, but it has the same damage profile. Yeah. Then this is the full assault rifle damage plot. I have the SC 2010 Ripper AR and the Honey Badger in like these dotted lines so that they stand out a little more, because these graphs kind of start getting a little bit chaotic and hard to look at if everything just looks the same. But yeah, here's the ARX 160 and the SA 805, way more damage than all the other guns, and also a higher fire rate, but this isn't accounting for fire rate. Yeah, and then the Remington and AK-12 are this blue line. Maverick is the red one here. A little tricky to read, but you can get a sense for what's dealing more damage at different distances. And then here's that same chart, but factoring in fire rates, and it's even more chaotic because this breaks up our pairs of the ARX and the SA-805 and the Remington and the AK-12. But all good stuff, right? We get into our first little Easter egg here. So the submachine guns, the K7 and the Vector share the same damage profile, which is crazy because the K7 shoots like twice as fast. And the K7 is just unreasonably goated in every like category. It's a little crazy. Here's our Ripper SMG. I mentioned earlier that the Ripper AR and SMG are actually have different damage profiles. So this is the DPS here, factoring in the rate of fire difference because they also shoot at different fire rates. Although they are doing the same actual value of the max and min damage. So yeah, the SMG like way more DPS up close, but the Ripper AR actually legitimately has higher DPS here in this like mid range. The SMG overtakes it in the long range, but also you probably wouldn't hit much with the SMG out here. So yeah, the Ripper AR is actually like really good. Outside of like the close range where the Ripper SMG melts, if you can get over the lack of aim assist with a controller, which is just silly. Okay, so Scorpion Girl here. If you know about this, then you're an OG. There was an old Extinction subreddit with like 20 people on it. I think it came from yeah. So the Extinction subreddit had a Discord server, and there was like nobody in it, and it was totally dead. But this one guy commissioned some anime artists to turn the cryptids into anime girls, and he sent like 1 or 2 pictures of them. But I had managed to track down the actual artist's like website or like Instagram or something, and I snagged all of them. And they are hidden throughout this spreadsheet. Not very hidden, but they're all in here. So yeah, we got everything about Extinction in this bitch. Yeah, moving on. The SMGs, these guys all kind of look similar, but they are a little bit different. CBJ, Vepr, Bison, MTAR-X. Interesting thing to note here is look at this minimum damage on the Bison. It's 17. It's tiny. Like, this is way lower than any other minimum damage. For some reason, the devs were just trying to be cruel to it, I guess. And, when I get to the damage chart down here, you see it just drops way below everything else. Tiny damage. And, yeah. These curves, they all look pretty similar, right? I guess the MTAR technically has a little bit more range. But, yeah, I don't know when my headset's dying. Maybe it doesn't like being used as a mic and not having audio played through it. It's weird. But yeah, K7 just goated. Always. K7 Vector, dude, incredible damage. And then, yeah, DPS, it's still K7 on top the entire way through. no matter what distance. This is a little bit absurd from a balance perspective, but hey, there it is. Most of the other SMGs kind of fall in this mid tier here. The Vector does notably carry its DPS out a little bit further. Yeah, K7 goated. Light machine guns, we only have 2 plots here because the LSAT, M27, and a melee all share the exact same damage profile. Chainsaw does more damage, but also loses, it drops off faster as well. Here's the damage comparison. Again, this line represents all 3 of the other LMGs, and this is just a chainsaw. Now, when we get to the DPS, these 3 do split up because they have different rates of fire, right? So you've got the MLA, M27, and LSAT. This is just sorting them based on how much ROF they have. Here's the Rhino Girl. All right, Marksman Rifles, this is where it gets a little bit interesting again. So IA2, MK14, and SVU, similar stories, the LMGs, they all have the same exact damage profile. The only thing separating them is their rate of fire. The MR28 is an interesting creature. So it starts out at 500 damage, and it carries it until you get 500 units away. Then this drop looks vertical. It basically is. Its max range is 500. Its min range is 501. So yeah, it's basically vertical. And this is where we have that visual bug I mentioned earlier. So the arc extends the max range by 1.75x, but the min range only gets extended by 1.5x. And the base numbers of these are so close that the max range is higher than the min range than what it calculates. And so that causes some issues. I'll talk more about that down lower. I have an entire thing dedicated to it because it plagued my mind for a while. When you put the burst fire on the MR28, though, it becomes a whole different weapon. It becomes a lot more similar to the normal DMRs, and it takes on, this is a pretty stock looking damage profile, right? Just it might not be immediately clear, but look, this is 500 damage, this is 165. It tanks it. Here's the DPS calculating, like accounting for the burst fire and burst delay. So yeah, the MR28 base deals almost double, maybe 75% more damage than the burst fire up close. And then there's a very brief moment where the burst fire technically is dealing more DPS, but this is a bit silly, right? The MR28 is just better without burst fire pretty much always. Here's our comparison of the damages. Again, the MR28 just comically higher than everything else. Here's the normal 3 DMRs, and then here's the burst fire MR28. Here's factoring for the DPS. I think this chart looks really cool, right? Because the MR28 is just like a rectangle, and then these guys are technically better than the MR28 in certain distances. The IA2 is actually really good. This is a considerable amount of DPS, and it holds it for a really long range. If you want to use the IA2, you can do some good work with it, just because of how spammable it is, right? And then the MK14 is less spammable, and then the SVU is less spammable, and then the burst fire MR28 here is just a bit bad. So moving on to the visual glitch, this is my full explanation of it here. So yeah, max range goes up by 75%, min range only goes up by 50%, so we have this part here where the curve is technically upside down, but when it comes to the holographic sight, all it's doing is interpolating between these 2 points to give you like the damage readout. So what the holographic sight sees is that you start at this minimum damage, and then you hit this 1.5x min range, and then you start going up to the max damage, and then it keeps the max damage the rest of the time. So the holographic sight reads out an inverted damage profile that increases with range instead of decreasing. Thankfully, that's just a visual bug, and the MR28 arcs, it actually just follows this blue line where it does crazy damage for a really long distance and then falls off over the course of like 1 inch. So yeah, yeah. Actually, it's pretty close to an inch because 1 unit or 12.5 units is 1 foot. So it's just about an inch. All right, onto the sniper rifles. Similar deal here. VKS has this profile, and then the USR and L115 have a shared profile here that, interestingly, the VKS has more range than the USR and L115, but they both do a lot more damage per shot. They're also not spammable, so, you know. This page, okay, this is actually a guy, I think on PlayStation, kind of like a score runner type, messaged me and asked for a detailed comparison of the VKS and the MR28. So I put these two plots together that are a little bit tricky to read, but that's because they consider a lot of different scenarios and they're pretty different from the typical plots that I have so far. So for the damage plot, I'm showing this top line here is what the MR28 is putting out with an arc and weapon specialist +4. Then you get rid of the weapon specialist +4, and then you get rid of the arc, and then a similar deal here with the VKS, except instead of showing the weapon specialist +4, I show it with do less damage. So this is pretty much a complete comparison of your options with or like what you could face if you're trying to use one of these single shot high power guns. And then the same thing here, but we're doing DPS, and since the VKS is higher this time, I do the weapon specialist line with the VKS and the MR28 line with do less damage. So yeah, I mean, takeaway is MR28, ton more damage up close, which is good from an accuracy standpoint. VKS, a lot more DPS because of how insanely spammable it is. So maybe if you need to like take out rhinos, or I guess this isn't really a high score thing, but if you wanted to kill a barrier hive really fast, use the VKS instead of the MR28. This is why. Then yeah, damage plot for the snipers. There's 2 lines here. DPS plot for the snipers. It's pretty stark contrast between the semi-auto VKS and the other 2 rifles here. And keep in mind the USR is able to get this awakening arc. The L115 is not. This is why the USR can one-shot hunters and the L115 can't. Shotguns. Here's the Seeker that I managed to find. So the shotgun profiles are a little different. Obviously, they don't have, once they get to the min range, the pellets just disappear. They don't continue on infinitely like the other guns do. They just they start here and then vanish. Yeah, so the shotguns, they shoot 8 pellets for 75 damage at the top to 50 damage at the bottom. And of course, as you get further away, not only is the pellet damage dropping, you're also going to miss more pellets because they come out randomly in a spread. So in reality, this dropped line is a lot steeper, right? The MTS 255 is an interesting one because it shares the, it being semi-auto with the Bulldog, but it also has the TAC-12's range, which is really cool. It has the most range out of the shotguns. That's why the MTS is kind of like low-key goated, but it does have 2 shots less than the Bulldog, unfortunately. Here's the damage profile showing that off, right? Bulldog is the shortest, FU6 in the middle, and the MTS and TAC at the top. So also, the down a page, the slugs deal the same damage as all 8 pellets hitting. So I guess technically they have more range that way. Also, the only way you get slugs is from explosive ammo, so they by default have a 1.1x multiplier, but they also can't get the weapon specialist, which is why everyone says that the slugs suck, um, because they're used to doing weapon specialist damage with a shotgun, and then they lose that for slugs. But the slugs also just vanish at the min range. They don't keep going. And here's the DPS profile. Similar story to what happened with the VKS and the sniper rifles, because the semi-auto ones are obviously dramatically faster at killing things than the pump action ones. And then that's it for the damage plots. It's a lot. This is kind of the bulk of the additions to the spreadsheet. I think it's a considerable amount of pages, and it was a lot of effort on Fox's part to test, and then on my part to get these all put together and looking decent. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. Now, all right, now we get to talk about the rest. So the breeder fight. Here we are. Venom X. The Venom X explosions deal 1/3 of their base damage to the breeder, and the DOT deals 75% damage. But waiting for the Venom shot to explode naturally deals double explosive damage. This actually, this is something I missed way further up. This applies to normal enemies as well. So on Nightfall, the Venom, if you just let the shot explode on its own, like you don't prematurely detonate it, the explosion deals double damage. With Engineer, that goes up to 2.5 times, not 3 for some reason. But yeah, this is kind of crazy. If you want to kill the breeder, this is a good way to do it. If you don't want to use your gun, just shoot it with the Venom shots and let it deal the double explosion damage. Then I think that's all we had for the breeder. For the Kraken, the Kraken is really, really, really weird. Like, tentacle HP is 10 million, but it leaves once 2,500 damage has been dealt. It's so weird. In co-op, it is just 2,500 times the number of players. It has a bunch of like random invincibility crap and iframes, which is how you get that video of the FP6 killing it in like 5 shots. We think it's programmed to be this stupid so that you have to watch some of the tentacles animations play out, kind of in a similar way to the Kraken fight, right? Yeah, tentacle is just a nightmare to test for such a small thing that doesn't matter at all. We have Valve HP. They seem to have about 200 HP and take the same damage per hit as the player does from enemies. There was a brief moment when Fox was finding that they might regen HP if they haven't been hit for a while, but that's not confirmed and also really incredibly weird. So we're just going to leave it as the Valves have 200 HP and they're very fragile, because that's what it definitely feels like that in game. So now Obelisk HP. So the Obelisks, I used to have them as having well over 100k HP, but actually they have 13,000 HP, so like the amount of a mammoth, but they take 0.1x damage from nearly everything. So my idea of the Obelisk taking an insane crit chance is basically how it works, except it's not that they have a crazy crit chance, it's that everything, or crazy crit damage, it's that everything that's not a crit is 10% damage. So the only things that are actually programmed to take the full damage to the Obelisk are these, the Vanguard stuff. The small missile, interestingly, it does more damage if you shoot at the bottom of the Obelisk. Yeah. Venom, same deal here, 1500, does more damage when you put it at the bottom. And then this is kind of opposite of what we had for Nightfall a little bit, that 2 Venom shots exploding at the same time does 4,500 damage, so it does an extra venom shot's worth of damage. And the venom grenades do 1,700. Diablos don't take increased damage from any buffs. Then the terminals, so all the way in the arc, they have 500 HP, which is more than the Valve's 200 HP, right? But thankfully you can at least repair the terminals, right? All right. Then we have a random supply table here. So this is pulled straight out of the game's code. This is the random supply team support box, right? And here's the probabilities of getting any specific thing out of the random supply box with it at different levels. The optimal upgrade level for the flares, for getting flares out of this, is +3, where you have a 9% chance. If you take it to +4, you only have a 5%. So it's a +4 random supply box has the same flare probability as a +0 supply box. So if you're trying to get flares, only take it to 3. And then yeah, it can't find Hypno Knives at all for some reason. Interesting, right? I have an Incendiary Ammo damage table here. So the Incendiary Ammo does different damage to different enemies. So it pulses for 6 times, but the actual damage it does per pulse is according to this table here. So yeah, Seekers it does 15. Rhinos it does 75. Mammoths it only does 22. This is all pretty interesting. And Incendiaries were something that we were struggling with for a long time, so I'm glad we were able to get all these numbers squared up. Yeah, shotguns, they do 8 pellets at once, but they're still only doing 1 incendiary's worth of damage, right, per time. And then having incendiary ammo in your gun makes the grenades disruptor 10 shots, turrets deal more fire damage as well. Yeah, and they're higher in co-op for some reason. This happens with melee damage as well, where there's like a little bit of a nerf to match the enemy HP and keep you from like one-knifing scouts and such. But yeah, fun. Then we have the Hypno Knife damage table. Here we are. Okay, so this is a Hypno Knifed enemy will deal this much damage to other enemies. They have increased damage with Master Scavenger, and interestingly, they have the same amount of HP regardless of whether it's a Master Scav Hypno or a regular Hypno, right? These HP values are not similar to what these are not their actual, or they're not comparable to what they have when they're enemies, because the enemies don't do nearly as much damage as you do. Yeah, this is good. This is all Fox's work as well here. Then I have a search box probabilities here. This is from the code. And this is just for POC. So, sorry, I need a drink real quick. I've been talking too long. So, these search boxes are placed around the map by the devs, and then they marked them as either easy, medium, or hard, depending on how hard they are to find. But really, you can search all of them. Nothing is hard to find. And whether they're easy, medium, or hard, they fall into one of these categories, and that determines their probability of pulling a specific thing. So, yeah, your first probability is finding an attachment. This is the trick to the chainsaw arc probability increase thing. Is you always have this probability of finding an attachment, then I don't know why it keeps doing that. It's so weird. After the it picks that you're getting an attachment, it determines which attachment it would be by picking out of the available attachments for your gun. And since the chainsaw only has 4, you have a 1 out of 4 probability of getting an arc at that point from the attachment, which is good. Yeah, so the big ammo boxes that fill your ammo all the way, they only come out of the hard boxes, right? You can't get trophies out of the easy boxes, and you can't get ammo clips out of the hard boxes. Yeah. This is just for POC. On other maps, it might be a little different because of locker keys and SOFLAMs either being there or not being there, right? But a pretty general idea of how the search system works. Then the next thing is we've got more about the arcing stun ammo here. So yeah, we have the arc stun ammo does 50% base damage. We previously thought it was like maybe around 70, but we're getting 50%, and it doesn't matter how many arcs deep it is. You just get 50% damage on the lightning bolt each time. And yeah, it arcs 1 time per upgrade, right? But that starts at level 0, so you max out at 5. And then the arcing stun, it cools down about 1.25 seconds between bolts, so that means that if you have like an MR28, or I guess a bolt action sniper rifle, if you're freaky, you're getting this, you're getting the arcing stun to happen a lot more. Now it's actually very weak on the shotguns because the arc is only dealing 50% damage of a single pellet instead of the 50% damage of the full pellet, and this actually seems to happen with CS ammo. Like, it still is only doing 1 pellet's worth of damage even though you're doing a slug. I don't know why. That's just weird. And then this is an interesting little piece of trivia. Since the CS ammo makes you lose the weapon damage buff and the awakening arc damage bonus, like the extra 25%, it's technically possible for stun ammo to outdamage CS ammo against a correctly spaced group of enemies on awakening. But this is a very unrealistic scenario because the enemies need to be close enough for the arcing stun to proc, but far enough that they wouldn't have gotten hit by the CS explosive blasts. So yeah, CS ammo goated with arcing stun. It's crazy. And if you have the arcing stun upgrade with CS ammo, you will set enemies on fire with the lightning bolt, which does a lot of damage, per that thing. All right, we have the POC Heli Damage was something that was added. Let's see if I can find it. Here we are. Yeah, okay, so the POC Heli Damage, it does only 40 damage per shot, which is, pretty lackluster for, I think the game's code refers to it as like 30mm Vulcan, which that's rather small for a 30mm cannon. But yeah, there's your point of contact helicopter damage. And then my last little change here is also there's the Rhino, and this is the last one of the Extinction anime girls I could find, was I added the change log here for the previous revision. So I copied over the old revisions change logs so you can have an idea of what all has went into this thing. And then all the way at the bottom, this is Extinction Spreadsheet v.0. This was before I even knew how to use Excel. It was in like 2017. I was just trying to shoot the ancestors with various guns and write down the damage that they dealt. And I was actually like not that far off on some of these. These pistols are straight from that forum post that I mentioned a long time ago with the max and min damages and stuff. Then let's see, this 96, this is because of the ancestors multiplier, I think. This should be 80. I think a lot of these is me just not accounting for various multipliers, but this is where it began on this shitty little rundown notebook in 2017, and here we are now, 86 pages of this. Yeah. If you made it this far in the video, you are an absolute legend. Thank you for watching.